All right, Gov, former governor as well of Minnesota, a state that's been in the news lately.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to run for Senator Franken's seat?
Well, as I've said many times,
Yes.
I'm politically retired, but if I change my mind,
I don't
Kevin,
think you're
you will
retired.
be one of the first to know.
I
You
hope
will.
that I am
You
the
will.
first to know if you do decide, but I don't think you're retired by any means because you guys are very busy over at FSR. Let me ask you a follow-up question, though, because you have said that. Should you decide to run, would you want Steve Bannon's endorsement?
Well, Minnesota's a different kind of place in the sense that, it's a swing state. There's a lot of ticket splitters. I don't know Steve Bannon. I've never met him. Obviously he's involved in a bunch of stuff on behalf of the Trump Perspective or Breitbart. I'm not sure that he even would endorse me. So I don't know enough about him to tell you whether I'd want his endorsement or not. But I don't think it would matter in Minnesota. It's not the kind of state where that kind of endorsement would really be a factor.
All right, let's talk tax reform because it looks like we're going to get a vote early next week. Do you think we're going to be there? Because just within the last hour, Senator Marco Rubio, according to the Washington Post, saying that he's not there yet. He's a no vote right now because of the family tax credit.
I think we will get there if you're a Republican and you have promised tax reform for over a decade. All these people running around the country telling their donors and supporters, if we ever get to be in charge, we'll do tax reform, and they don't do it and they miss this opportunity. It's going to be a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces. As to Marco's point, Senator Rubio's point, he's legitimately concerned about this bill not doing enough for the middle class and particularly working families. So he wants that child tax credit increased. It's increased a little in the bill, but not as much as he wanted. I think in the end he'll vote for the bill.
21% corporate tax rate, good enough?
Yeah, President Trump started at 15. He sort of drew a line at 20. He compromised at 21. But going from 20 to 21 allowed him to make some other adjustments in the bill that were hopefully
little
favorable.
here, little there. You talked about egg on the face of a lot of folks, but Gov, you know this as well as anybody. The Democrats are going to hammer this bill. They're already doing it, saying that it only helps rich people. And, Senator Rubio trying to make the case, give a little more for the middle class. But how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I would say just a few quick things. One is the core of this bill, whether people like it or not, is business tax relief to make American businesses more competitive so they can hopefully add more jobs, and not only add more jobs, for the people who are already working, increase their wages. If that doesn't happen, you're going to have some ticked off people, and understandably
putting it mildly.
so. Understandably so. And one other quick thing that may be just coincidence or bad timing. Since World War II, there's been a recession every 7 years. The longest there's ever been, on average, longest it's ever been since World War II between recessions is 9 years. We're in year 8 of this recovery. And so if we tumble into a recession, notwithstanding this tax bill, the timing of that is going to look like this growth that you promised me didn't happen. So
that's interesting.
Some of it's going to be luck.
That's really interesting about the growth argument because yesterday President Trump predicting again, that this with the tax bill, he wants to get to 4% GDP growth. He blames a little bit, like a lot of companies have, on the hurricanes. Fed Chair Janet Yellen kind of signaling otherwise, saying that she's unsure if the United States can get to that. It was like back to back they made these comments. Are Republicans going to lose the majority, though, if, as you just explained, folks fill out their taxes and over the next couple of months, and they don't see that tax cut?
Yeah, I want to be clear. This bill does a number of good things for average taxpayers. One is to double the standard deduction or exemption, so more people, up to 90% of all tax filers, can put their returns on one page, and the deduction, if you don't itemize, is doubled. So that's good. And the average family will save, depending on which study you want to look at or which interest group you want to listen to, somewhere between maybe $500 and $1,500 a family. That's something, and it's meaningful, I think, to working Americans. But the real goal here is to try to get the economy moving faster and higher and to get wage growth growing. That's going to be the tail of the tape. That's where going to be the proof in the pudding. That's going to be where the banana gets peeled. And if it doesn't happen, Kevin, and it better, because otherwise Republicans should say, we missed. But that's the theory, that's the hope, and that's the plan. And so it better happen.
Pass-through rates, state and local tax deductions. There's still a lot of back and forth happening. When I interview folks from states like New York and California, Republicans, your party, they have a lot of concerns about this. And I guess my question is, let's say this does get through, but Republicans in those states actually end up getting a tax hike. And 401ks are growing. I hear that argument. But could that ultimately be another reason why folks, vote Democrat in the midterms? There's a lot of implications here.
I think there's a lot. The big bet is this will grow the economy.
Yeah.
All the experts say this tax bill will grow the economy somewhere between, say, 0.4 and 0.8%. So if you add that to our high 2%, say 2.7 GPA, GPA. GDP. Yeah. That'll get you to 3 or maybe a smidge above 3. So that's better, and it's better than the anemic growth that we've experienced. But people need to feel that in sense of confidence.
They gotta feel it.
And if they don't, then it's going to boomerang.
Not just tax reform.
But by the way, next year is going to be tough anyhow, even before you factor in tax reform. So it's not to say that everything would have been great with or without tax reform. It's a tough year anyhow.
Let's talk about next year. First quarter next year, community banking reg relief, yes or no, is it going to happen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
How so? Because the House has a comprehensive plan. I mean, the Senate Banking Committee Chairman, Mike Crapo, has been not had as much of a comprehensive plan. It's been a little more targeted. Do you think this will be bipartisan?
Senator Crapo has put together a bipartisan coalition to pass reasonable bank regulations, particularly for community banks in the Senate. And I think the House will ultimately be convinced not to overreach and get something passed. And I think that's why it'll happen.
FSR represents a host of financial institutions.
Yes.
You guys on board with keeping it just to focused on community banking reg relief?
Yeah, the Crapo bill is a little more than just community bank relief. Mm-hmm. It also includes raising, not to get too technical with your viewers, but they
love it.
I'm sure they do. Yeah. They raise some thresholds over the level of supervision for some regional banks as well. Again, it's not earth-shattering, but it's helpful. And the theory is, unless you get to the much bigger banks, no one of these smaller or mid-size or sub-regional banks or regional banks is systemically going to take down the whole system. Therefore, you can be a little more relaxed or at least constructive when it comes to regulation. Yeah,
the one-size-fits-all regulation from Dodd-Frank has proven potentially that ultimately the big banks got bigger while these smaller banks are still missing out.
And it's a form of tailoring. So our argument is, you do need to have not a one-size-fits-all, but something that's right for community banks, for mid-size, different for mid-size, different for regionals, different for the so-called globally systemic important organizations or institutions.
SIFI designation. Governor Pawlenty getting in the weeds with us here on Bloomberg TV.
And you love this.
I love this stuff. You know that. All right,
I know.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it as always.